So today I'll be talking with Nate Miyaki, creator of the Half Day Diet. Nate, thanks for joining me on this call and taking the time here. I just want to first tell you right off the bat that I really appreciate your approach that you've taken to dieting. It's really influenced how I've reshaped my own eating patterns, and I really think it's fantastic stuff. The first thing I want to start with is I want to get your superhero origin story. I want to know why you started training, what got you motivated to do it, and basically how you got into the nutritional aspect of it as well as a focus.
Sure, man. Kind of a long story. I started off more in traditional sports, and then when I got into college, I actually transitioned into doing more training, believe it or not, for martial arts, and then eventually stunts and pro wrestling. So I had kind of shifted my training over time more for performance-based stuff, and then as I got into the wrestling, it was more a little bit of mix of kind of performance and then physique, because obviously it's sports entertainment. Yeah. And then through that, after that sort of part of my phase ended, I got more into training for natural bodybuilding and physique-based stuff. So kind of transitioned from a performance athlete more to a physique-oriented athlete. And then during that time, to make a living, I started working as a trainer. My background was more biomechanics and kinesiology. So I came out of college just kind of doing personal training for a living. And the reason I shifted towards nutritional research was not only for myself as an athlete, as I transitioned more to physique, realizing how much more diet obviously was important, or they're all important, but just the bigger role that diet plays for someone who's, chasing, body transformation and physique goals. And then also working with clients saying, hey, I had the best science-based programs in the world, but if I didn't work with them on their nutrition plans, their results were mediocre at best. And most of those people were coming to me for, again, physique-oriented goals. So that's kind of the development of how I got more into nutrition research, just because I needed to, both for myself and for my private practice. And then I had taken a few courses in college, but I really just got into sort of independent research in a variety of, from bodybuilding nutrition to sports nutrition to, just research reviews and things like that. That's kind of been the development of my career.
Excellent. So going like way back to the very beginning though, like what caused you to pick up a weight the very first time? What was your deep motivation?
Yes.
Let's go dig into the psychology. I'm going to make you cry here. I'm going to make you cry. It's my goal.
It's messed up, man. I actually am really good with numbers. I probably should have been a banker if it wasn't for some scarring that happened as a kid. I was actually a fat kid. I was actually I have 5 older brothers, and they were all kind of skinny and athletic, and I came out looking like a potato. So they used to call me the baby sumo. So I think I dealt with emotional scars of being the youngest brother who got picked on all the time because he was fat. And when I got into high school, I just kind of was an all right athlete. I mean, and then I just like, man, I gotta do something, not just for my own confidence, but just to get better as an athlete, so I'm not getting my butt kicked at home by my brothers and my butt kicked on the field as an athlete. So so about we had a really good coach, really good strength and conditioning coach at our high school, and so I think it was after sophomore year that's when they started allowing us to lift weights, and it was a game changer for me, man. Just from an athlete's perspective, and then from a just personal confidence and all of that perspective, it was a game changer, and I've been bitten by the iron bug, as they say, ever since. It's been a huge aspect of my life ever since, for the last 20 years or so.
Yeah, no, it always kind of is on a related topic when people ask me, like, what are you going to do when you stop training? Is all your muscle going to turn to fat? And I'm like, stop training.
Yeah.
I didn't understand anything past those words. It sounds like that's exactly what you've got going there too, and that's just fantastic, because the passion for what you do really came through in what you were writing in your book there too, and it's not a dry nutrition textbook by any stretch of the imagination. It's actually very easy to read, which is really phenomenal.
Great, I appreciate it, and it is my passion. It's been, it goes beyond just kind of my career, like I always tell people, and it gets a little cheesy, but it's always, training has always been my escape. It's always been kind of what other people use martial arts for, or meditation for, or yoga for. It's always been my one thing, is provide provided, sort of my balance in, the chaos that is life. So it's always been the one thing that I've kind of turned to. So I take it seriously, man, and I love it. And I'm with you, man. I'm like, what am I going to do when I stop training? I don't know. I'll be
Be
6
dead.
feet under somewhere.
Exactly. Yeah, that's my dad's 80 years old and he still trains hard.
Yeah, that's
You just got to
awesome.
keep going all the way. So.
Absolutely.
In terms of getting more into the nutrition side of things, did you ever go into like a paleo type of approach? Because I know that's extremely popular these days, and it's very controversial as well.
Yeah. And I would still say like 80% of my diet recommendations are paleo influenced because I think it does a lot of good things. And so, yeah, I initially got into paleo research because I was just doing sort of traditional bodybuilding diets
Mm-hmm.
and was getting great results from a physique perspective, but was having a lot of, uh, personally, was having a lot of sort of GI distress and things like that, just from suboptimal food choices. So it was really, paleo nutrition was great in the beginning for me to just understand more about this whole evolutionary theory of optimizing food choices and how food choices can affect your health. And it's not just about the numbers, it's about food quality as well. So yeah, it was a great influence in the beginning. The problem was I was trying to combine the most traditionally understood version of paleo diets with anaerobic training. And, after a while, it just was a mismatched diet plan from a numbers perspective. So there's, I sort of look at nutrition as three things: numbers, food choices, and then diet structure. And so while the paleo diet was good influence on the food choices, as an athlete, I wasn't supporting the training that I was doing based on the goals that I had, and again, like the training program that I had set up. So it was a mismatched diet from a, I guess, exercise physiology perspective. But
Yeah.
I don't like dissing on the paleo diet the way many people are now, because I do think there's so many great lessons that we can learn from that. And then so that's just what I did. I absorbed what was useful from that, and then kind of just combined that with sports nutrition research to get, and what I believe is the best of both worlds.
Mm-hmm.
Other people might argue that, but so yeah, I think paleo diet is great, and I think understanding that was one of the reasons I went away. I mean, I was originally going to go into dietetic school and a master's program in nutrition, but I decided not to based on my sort of exposure to paleo research and things like that. So I know that was a long-winded answer to that, but yeah, I think there's a lot of great things in the paleo diet. I will never bash it because it has had a big influence on my approach, but I do think there's some modifications that need to be made based on the demographic.
Yeah, no, it's kind of been my experience with it as well. And for me too, I'm not a big fan of bashing anything with regards to training. I mean,
Right.
there's no real point to it. It's like everything, none of these training techniques or nutritional techniques, they don't have feelings,
Yes,
It's like you don't
exactly.
need to,
Exactly.
you don't need to bash them. They're just a tool in your toolbox. And like you
Sure.
said, if the tool doesn't quite fit the job, you don't use it. You're not
Right.
trying to hammer nails with a screwdriver,
Totally. Totally. Totally.
Whereas,
Totally.
yeah. So your approach
Absolutely.
is, I think, is like you said, one of the biggest mistakes people make with paleo.
Yeah, and I think so. For me, when I approach paleo, I'm just looking for simple educational templates that can be used to get people to grasp concepts in a simple way. So a lot of people will get into this whole argument over anthropology and semantics. I'm like, who cares? Just like the idea is to eat real natural foods over refined foods.
Yeah.
And it's funny, once you get into it, there are many different camps in paleo, and some of them are a lot more flexible. I mean, the one who's had a big influence on me on Rob Wolf, and he's like, listen, dude, there's a lot of things fall into the paleo envelope. So you can have a high carb paleo based diet. Look at some of these non-industrialized cultures that do that. So I think if we can lose the dogma and the semantics and the anthropology of it all and just focus on, the good concepts that come from it,
Yeah.
whether you're sedentary or whether you're an athlete, you can learn a lot of great things from the paleo diet for sure.
Oh yeah, and that Bruce Lee quote, just discard what is not useful, focus on what is useful, forget all the garbage. It's like if you
Yeah.
really want to do a paleo diet, you're eating a lot of dirt and bugs.
Yeah, right.
You know,
Exactly.
that's what people kind of miss with that. They don't think they really washed their food. They didn't boil their water. It's like you
Right.
really want to go paleo. That's what you're gonna do. It's like no, you're not gonna go paleo. You're not gonna go hunt your own food for the most part.
And you should walk
But
around naked if you really want to be paleo too.
exactly, it's like naked and afraid. They don't
Hey,
last
that's
very
fine with
long.
me too. You know what I'm
No,
saying?
yeah. Oh man, yeah.
Yeah.
As,
Our industry's fun, right?
yeah,
So.
yeah. I just got a flashback. When I was working on cruise ships a long time ago, I worked on, it was chartered by a naked group, basically. So
Oh,
it was like
nice.
there was 1,500 naked people running around on this ship, and
That's funny. That
vast
sounds like
majority
fun.
of them, yeah, they weren't on no diet.
Right.
So yeah, but yeah, sorry, I just got the chills down the spine there. So, yeah. Now, going back to food quality, since you mentioned that, food quality versus calories, there's been a lot of controversy on that. People who eat like a junk food diet just to prove that you can eat 1,000 calories a day and lose weight while you're eating candy bars all day. What are your thoughts on that? What does that do to your body?
Yeah, I think food quality matters for a couple reasons, and I get it. I get it. So I have a hierarchy of importance when I work with people, and it's actually different for different demographics. So a lot of the sort of if it fits your macros approach and things like that works well for athletes, because when I work with athletes, I do have that hierarchy saying, listen, the numbers are the most important. So there is some truth to that approach, is that as long as you hit your numbers and your meaning calories and protein and the right macro distributions for you, you can get good physique results any way you see fit. I still think that's problematic for an athlete for several reasons. One is we just talked about the health reasons, and I think things like insulin sensitivity and just your overall biomarkers of health, it's not going to deteriorate over a 12-week time frame, right? It's our lifestyle that basically has the accumulative effects on our health. And so, I've worked with people who great fast metabolisms who are now in their 40s and 50s, and they're like, man, I have all these health problems and I don't get it. I've always been lean, and I've always, it's I'm like, well, there's the independent health aspects of food we have to look at beyond kind of the physique results you get. And then the secondary reason is I find even for athletes who can get results on that plan is the long-term sustainability of that. Meaning that, if you want to be lean year round, it's very hard to stay in the calorie deficit necessary for fat loss if you're eating predominantly refined food. So it's much easier to maintain it as a year-long plan if the majority of your diet is real, whole, natural food. So I think there's smarter. And again, if we get back to the non-dogma, it's like, dude, you got to eat Pop-Tarts and ice cream and pizza all day just to prove you can, if it fits your macros, works. It's like, no. Most of the real intelligent guys who are applying it are saying, listen, 80 to 90% of my diet is still real, whole, natural, healthy foods. The idea is that 10% or 20% is, a little bit more flexible than, some of the people who are dogmatic paleo and say, no, you can never eat bread or whatever. So I think there's smart application of that. But I do think if you care about your health as well as your physique, food quality definitely matters. And I also think in terms of, like I said, long-term sustainability, it matters because the satiety aspects of food, right? It's just so much easier to stay in a deficit if you're eating potatoes and animal proteins and whole fruit versus, again, low-fat fudge cake or whatever.
Exactly, yeah. It's caloric density and nutrient
Right,
density.
right.
Yeah.
Nutrition value, yeah. You said it much more eloquently and simply than me. Nutrient density, satiety, and all that, for sure.
Yeah, I totally agree with you. It's like if you're burning clean logs in a fire versus logs soaked in creosote,
Sure, yeah, exactly.
sure,
Exactly.
they're both going to burn, but
Right, right,
that's a whole
right.
different ballgame. Yeah. Now, I wanted to ask you too, gluten-free eating. Now, this
Yeah,
is obviously a big hot button thing in nutritional science and in the media.
sure.
What's your current experience with that and your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think there's. I'll just give my general framework for controversial foods. Um, I always apply a test and assess strategy. Now I have my certain templates that I start with, and it's based on more the foods that I recommend than and like it's basically kind of a paleo-ish diet or I call it an island style diet, so same thing but a little bit higher carb with the root vegetables and rice added. So some of those foods are not in my baseline templates anyways, but I do think there's some foods that most nutritionists would agree we probably should reduce, right? So hey, trans fats and concentrated sources of refined sugar and things like that. And then there is these foods that are a little bit more controversial, dairy and gluten and things like that. I always tell people, listen, beyond any starting framework, use a test and assess strategy, and then you'll find the answer that works for you versus, again, getting caught up in these different camps and saying, hey, you can never eat gluten. I know people who include gluten in their diet, and they're fine from both a health and a physique perspective. Fine. I also know people who have cut that out, and it has been the game changer. It has been the lifesaver. So what I tell people is like, start with a baseline template, and then if you don't know about a food, test and assess. Cut it out for a week or two, see how you look and feel, add it back in, see how you look and feel, and then you'll have the answer specifically for you versus depending on my opinion or any of the other camps out there. But I came up with my sort of food templates based on cultural nutrition and based off some of the plans that have worked well for me and a larger percentage of my clients. And I feel that most people do better with beyond gluten, shifting their carbs more towards root vegetables and rice versus the grains and the breads and the things like that. So again, I always, sorry if I give long-winded answers, but I like to explain my entire position so people know where I'm coming from.
That's the whole point of this, man. Just feel free to
feel free
to unload, man. This is good stuff.
I don't want to bore people. I don't want to bore people. I get all nerdy and geeky about this, but you know.
Yeah, you can. The passion for it comes through, and that's the important thing. That's why people are watching this and listening to this. Is
right on.
They share the passion for this and they want to hear about it. So it's
yeah.
And actually, you brought up an interesting fact there with the cultural based diet.
Yeah.
I've heard kind of in the past that you should kind of eat as to where your ancestors originated. Like for example, for me. I have a Swedish background, Scandinavian, lots of fish-based diet. Do you find that kind of holds true with people's ethnic background as well?
Yeah, I mean, I guess it's when people look at mine, they're like, dude, you're half Irish and half Japanese, so you're saying eat rice and potatoes. That makes sense. Yeah, of course.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it definitely could. I think there's a lot of one of the guys I follow is he writes a lot about non-industrialized cultural diets. Instead of talking about it just in terms of pure like sort of caveman and paleo like we have so far, he's like, listen, there's all these different cultures. There's some commonalities, but there's some differences among them too. And so, yeah, I think that's an interesting line of thought, and it's certainly could be applicable. I think, yeah, definitely. And so. Some people, like we talked about, these food, that's why you kind of sort of have to test and assess, because some people from certain parts of the world, they do fine with dairy. I'm my dairy bias could be that I'm half Japanese, and I just cutting it out was one of the key points of my nutritional evolution to get where I wanted to go. So yeah, I do think there's some thought there. And so while I give people baseline templates, that's why I always leave that freedom for testing and assessing, because who knows? There could be a ton of science on that we just don't even know yet, right? So, I think that's an interesting line of thought. I think there's some validity there, and I think that's why I often leave some wiggle room. Some people like a full, complete system, but I've just worked with enough people, and I still work offline a lot, and I just know that beyond a good starting point, you do have to allow a little bit of sort of flexibility in the plan, right?
Absolutely, yeah. And actually brings me right into the next thing that.
Oh, cool.
What are your thoughts on meal plans? Like for me, for example, I can't stand meal plans. I've done one in my life, and it was actually for a university college project for my nutrition class, and I ended up almost failing the class because my nutrition plan was very bodybuilder oriented, and this guy says everything's wrong. The professor was like, everything is wrong, and gave me a D- on it. I'm like, that's great, but. Going back to the actual question, what are your thoughts on meal plans? A good thing, bad thing, good for some people, or?
Yeah, I think the latter. I think it depends on the person, and it depends on the psychology. So again, I just think having that experience of working with people in the real world, that's why sometimes people are like, well, you don't really give us one specific answer. I'm like, well, because I know I've worked with enough people to know there is no one specific answer, right? So I personally prefer to work with templates. So when I give someone a plan, it's like there needs to be, it can't just be a free for all, like, hey, do whatever you want kind of thing, because then you won't, it's not going to work, right? So but at the same time, I like some flexibility with plans and allow people to have some basic strategies in place, but then, hey, if you're out and you don't feel like eating chicken and a baked potato, you'd rather have a steak and some rice or whatever, there's enough flexibility where people can make it practical and doable in the real world. So honestly, for me, if my own psychology, I work with food templates. At the same time, I know other people, I work with a lot of entrepreneurs who are making decisions all day. When they go to eat, they don't want to have any decision at all. So they want, dude, tell me what to eat on this day, this day, this day, this day. And I'll hire a chef to prepare it for me. I just want to know, so with that demographic, it does work better to have specific meal plans. So what we try to do is offer different options for people. There's templates, but then there's also follow along meal plans based on if that is something that you think works with you. And honestly, offline, I have clients who use both, and they thrive on both. And if you try to get one to switch over to the other, their results start getting less and less and less. So I think it's about figuring out your own psychology, what you think works better, and then figuring it out from there. You know what I mean?
Absolutely, yeah. And that's interesting with what you said. There's like two different camps of people as far as the mentality. It's like some people,
Sure.
yay meal plan, some people no meal plan.
Right.
And
Right.
I think really the key that I found is caloric awareness in people.
Yep.
For people who need meal plans, they don't really have that. And they need that structure where people who kind of have an idea of how much they should be eating, they don't really need a meal plan to tell them exactly what to eat and how much of it to eat. So
Right. Definitely. So many different things. So for some of the people who don't want to think about anything, or they don't want to track anything or whatever, they actually might do better in the beginning with a specific meal plan. For other people who want more flexibility, but then on the back end are willing to track things and stuff, they probably do better with templates. So it's just the application of it, right? It's just how it works for that very specific person.
yeah, no, for me personally, I take a sledgehammer approach to my nutrition. It's like I'll do this for these days, and just everything is on that, and then I'll switch all my nutrient everything on this, and then it's just I don't like the
Yeah.
detailed stuff. I just want to eat.
Yeah. And honestly, I'm the same way. Like for me, for convenience too, because my days are so fluid. Is that I might only be able to cook a couple times a week. So I might cook a big crock pot of stuff, and I'm eating that for 2 or 3 days in a row, and then I'll cook a crock pot of different something, and I'll eat that. Kind of same thing. So for me, I don't really feel like I need a meal plan because it's just I kind of have a good idea of what I'm doing anyways. But again, some of my clients, they're like, that's not going to work. I got to know exactly what I need.
Yeah,
Every day.
absolutely. Now, how many meals a day do you generally eat yourself?
So the core, it's funny because I just did a big blog post about this, and the core concept of my plan is the half day, is the idea that the biggest, and I've always wanted to distinguish it from intermittent fasting. So earlier iterations of it were called intermittent feasting or whatever, but the idea is that just this idea of, from a practicality and sustainability perspective, is eating your biggest meal at night when most of us naturally want to, and evolutionary want to socially. That's what we do. So that is a key hook. So for me, it's always my one bigger main meal is at night with the majority of my calories and carbs. What I do during the day has been very flexible for me. I would say my baseline template is 2 meals a day. I basically, I've done intermittent fasting, or what I've been doing recently is doing a little bit of very light snack in the morning. So I might have a piece of fruit or a couple hard-boiled eggs or something like that. And then I have a paleo-ish style lunch where it's protein and vegetables, maybe some fruit. And then my biggest meal is at night with the majority of my starchy carbohydrate intake. But to be honest, and what we've talked about in the book, is there's a lot of flexibility with what you do during the day based on what works best for you. But the main principle is eating the bigger meal at night. So to honestly answer your question, it sometimes it changes, but I would say the majority of the times I'm eating two meals a day, sometimes with a third snack or something like that.
Excellent. Yeah, that's honestly one of the biggest things that I think a lot of people kind of struggle with in a traditional diet, where it's flipped around, where it's like it's ground into your head: eat a big breakfast and then taper down. Don't eat after 6 p.m., which is exactly the opposite of what you should be doing. And the research has shown this, that you've done, and it's really what screws people up when they're dieting. It totally screws people up. So yeah, feel free to talk about that, because I think that's one of the most important things about this whole idea.
Yes, that was, like hierarchy of importance. Like I said, I think let's just say someone whose goal is body composition transformation. The hierarchy of importance is sort of, the right diet numbers, then the food choices, then the diet structure. That's just from a physiological perspective. But from a practicality, from an adherence, from an ease of plan, from an enjoyment plan, I think the diet structure is actually the most important. That's why we focused on the half-day diet, is that that's what I was finding in my private practice, is that, diet structure is the most important thing for sustainability, and that's where people were falling. That's why you look at research, and the success rates of most diets are like 2 to 20%, depending on what studies you're using, because no one can actually stick to those plans in the real world. I mean, it might work. The whole idea of eating a huge meal in the morning and then eating 6 small meals the rest of the day and then starving at night only works for a very, very, very small demographic that maybe is a little bit OCD and athletic, right?
Yeah.
But for the majority of people who have real jobs in the real world outside of fitness, who who have a career, who are building a business on the side, all these different things, the whole being a slave to the traditional fitness nutrition myths was just killing their adherence rates and killing their results, and they weren't getting anywhere despite all these great plans that look great on paper. They weren't working in the real world, and that was sort of the challenge that I took the last couple of years in my business, and honestly it came from a necessity, is that my clientele shift a little bit away from competitive athletes, more towards like busy professionals. And I'm like, wow, these fitness plans aren't working for this demographic, right? So we need to come up with a better solution. And as you said, I'm a very science-based guy, so it took seeing some of the newer research is coming out saying, listen, as long as you control for calories and food choices, meal frequency and food distribution, it doesn't matter. Use whatever plan is the easiest to stick to. And I was just finding that, in my private practice, is that, man, you tell people, hey, you can reduce your meal frequency. You can just focus on breakfast, lunch, and dinner, or even just lunch and dinner, and have a big meal at night, and you could get the same physique results. Man, that's when results just started skyrocketing. Because if you think about it just logically away from the fitness industry, what sounds more practical and doable? It's like, of course, yes, I can eat lighter during the day, and I get to go home and have a big meal at night. This is great. This is fantastic. Hey, it works as an everyday plan, not just as a quick fix.
Yeah.
For diet or whatever.
That's exactly right, and that's been my own experience. I have started eating like this a while ago, kind of based on actually your theories on this, and I found it just a total game changer. I actually get more done during the day too, because my traditional breakfast while I was doing like bodybuilding training was this giant bucket of oatmeal and cut up fruit and yogurt and half a dozen eggs, and that would take me time to prepare and time to eat. And then by the time I'm done with that, then I get this carb crash, and then I'm like,
yeah,
But now it's I haven't even had anything to eat yet today, and that's fine for me. I have great energy, and sometimes like half a dozen eggs for breakfast in the morning. Have great energy. I don't get hungry during the day, and then at night when I'm tired and ready to relax, 4,000 calorie meal, and I get to enjoy it.
Yeah.
That's just awesome, and that's, I think, totally a game changer as far as that goes. And the concept of the 24-hour calorie cycle, I think, is a big one too. If you want to talk more about that too.
I'm sorry,
the 24-hour total calorie being the most important thing, rather than meal frequency.
Yeah, absolutely. So a lot of this idea of that, and it makes sense. Hey, at the end of the day, it's your total caloric intake, your total macronutrient intake for the day that matters most. How you break it up has much less of an impact on whether your goal is weight loss or muscle building or things like that. And that's all the research that I've seen anyways. So this idea that, well, if at the end of the day, it's your 24-hour average of what you ate, well, you now have the freedom then to say, okay, well, what do I think? Okay, if that's the case, how can I break this up, and how can I have a diet structure that makes that as easy as possible to maybe be in a calorie deficit for fat loss? And that's just what I was saying, is that when you start looking at that, you're like, well, of course. I mean, we and I've been influenced by other guys like Ori Hofmeckler and things like that. Some of the IF guys, and there's a lot of research and a lot of authors writing about it now. Was that, well, it makes so much more sense from our again, this is where I go back to evolution as maybe one of my sort of overarching principles in my diet approach, is that if you think about it, for most of our existence, we were hunter-gatherers, right? We were eating lighter during the day, and then while we're active, sometimes fasting and coming home and having our biggest meal at night. That's our evolutionary instinct. That's why so many people, you start looking at dialogues, they're like, oh, I'm good during the day, but then I cheat and binge at night when I'm trying to cut calories. I'm like, yes, because it's going so much against our natural evolutionary existence and our, what we're meant to be doing. With that freedom to say, and the science behind it to say, listen, well, it doesn't matter. Well, then that's when I'm like, well, let's play around with some different stuff. And then obviously gravitated towards the half-day approach, which is, again, for a lot of people who have struggled with fitness diets, they're finding that this has been the one switch, again, from a sustainability and practicality standpoint, that they've all of a sudden just been like failed on so many diet plans before, that they're like, wow, I can do this, and this seems like a lifestyle plan for the first time versus a quick fix diet. That's kind of the evolution of that.
Yeah. All this science stuff, man, it's crazy.
Yeah. And practical experience more as well is like, in the end, that's what matters. The science of the science, and it all looks good on paper, but take a step back from that. I really do think it's like, hey, just take a step back and think about it logically. Like, and I tell people, my clients, I'm like, dude, I mean, science, who cares? What works in the real world? And then they're like, yeah, dude, that for the first time, I'd write a plan, hey, you're going to eat, at this 6 a.m., you're going to eat this, and then at 9 a.m., you're going to pack a Tupperware and eat this, and then at 12, by the time you get to 3 p.m., half of your clients are like looking at you, going like, yeah, I ain't going to do
the
that.
First day.
Yeah, great. Yeah. You could sit around in the gym reading fitness magazines. I'm like, well, I'm not, but yeah, I get it. But then when you're like, oh, right, well, dude, you can either like just grab a cup of coffee, run out the door, or maybe you want a piece of fruit, or a couple hard-boiled eggs or whatever, and then you're gonna be working. That's what you want to do, and then lunch comes around, you're gonna eat lunch like a normal person. You're just not gonna eat a huge lunch where you're getting rebound hypoglycemia and crashing out your desk at 3. You're just gonna eat lighter with some proteins and some natural vegetable whole fruit foods, and then, dude, you're gonna go out to that steakhouse and with your colleagues, and you're not gonna have to sit there and be like, yeah, I want a lettuce there. I'm gonna pretend that's a lifestyle plan. No, you're gonna have a steak, and you're gonna have a big potato, and you're gonna whatever you're gonna go home and have a nice dinner with your family and enjoy it, and in a social setting. They're like, oh yeah, all right, well, I can do this now. Yeah, this sounds like a reasonable plan to me. So again,
it's interesting, too. I always have two perspectives on science, too. It's like, on one hand, you use it to kind of guide where you're going. On the other hand, you use it to explain what you already know.
Yeah, exactly. And that's why I use it, but I'm not a slave to it either. I am also interested more in adherence and practicality more than anything. So I think that's the biggest thing. And it's always nice when then new studies come out supporting what you advocate, but I am not a slave to it either. But I think there's a lot of cool stuff coming out now that is sort of supporting this.
Yeah, I think that's the great approach to take with the science of it. That not everything has to be peer-reviewed, studied in order to it to actually work. You can actually do stuff that's not based on science all the time.
Totally, and that's I mean, we know that in the training realm, right? Yeah. There's things now that are coming out with EMG studies that now support what Vince Garanda was saying about biomechanics 40 years ago, right? Sometimes you have to get in there and actually just put in the work in the real world and see how it plays out.
Yeah, exactly. I think a lot of people miss that sometimes, and that's refreshing to hear. Now, in terms of results, you've been talking about, you've had clients on this. What's kind of your superstar results that you've seen with people who you put on this kind of plan?
Yeah, I mean, I had one client who was just his sort of. Well, I'll give you a huge transformation, and then a different one, a more athletic one. So one guy, John was talking about how once he integrated intermittent, sort of that approach of the half day or the intermittent feasting approach, how he used that, and he could never get results on basic fitness plans before, and he lost something like 250 pounds or something, went from obese to just normal looking fit guy. And he's actually, last I heard from him, it's changed his life. He's becoming a trainer, and he wants to share all that knowledge and the training knowledge with people out where he lives now. So it completely transformed his life and his career direction, because he was so passionate about what this provided for him. And it was part of mine, and part of it was other authors and too, but he's been in email exchange with me ever since. My other client was someone who's more on the athletic side of things, and he just found he was someone who got great results on the surface, meaning he was always in shape and he was always booking modeling jobs and things like that. But he's like, dude, I'm miserable. He's like, he's like, my whole life revolves around my diet, and it's just, there's days where, I just want to kill someone. And there's other days where I'm stuffed and I just can't, I'm getting rebound hypoglycemia, trying to do these things where I'm eating first thing in the morning. And it's just, he's like, so he was someone who, from a lifestyle perspective, he's like, man, just switching over to this. And, some of the things you talk about when you talk about different carb cycling plans and how you do a different approach to that. He's just like, dude, it's just made staying in shape year round so much easier. And now he competes. He's a trainer himself, so his client list is full. He gets modeling gigs all the time. So his was more of a little bit that crazy athletic realm, physique realm, that it just made it more sustainable for the long term. And the reason he started talking about it is because we're colleagues. So he's like, dude, you're kind of staying shape year round and you're doing some modeling stuff. Like, you seem like a happy guy. How come I'm freaking miserable over here? And I'm like, well, I take a little bit different approach. It's not necessarily the traditional bodybuilding approach. And he's like, well, tell me about it. And so those are two stories. There's been others, but those are the ones that pop in my head today.
Those are really, really good ones too, because I know for me personally, a lot of my audience is kind of in that same boat where some people are really overweight and they want to have a flexible program that doesn't take over their entire life. And some people are already really good shape, want to train and not have it take over their entire life. And that can happen very easily. And
I would love to say I created this for people, but I'm a selfish piece of crap. I created this stuff, mostly because of me in the beginning. So a lot of it came from me, is that I was getting good results with the food choices and the numbers, but I was having a hard time, as I was building my business. And then I was starting, because I was getting a little bit more exposure online, I was starting to have to be someone who was getting opportunities to do. Like, I represented a fitness app company, and then I did a photo shoot with a magazine. It was like, dude, I needed to find a plan that had me stay in shape year round, but I could also build my business and things like that. So my life couldn't revolve around my diet anymore. So initially it was very selfish to create this thing. Was for me. I was like, I got to find something that's more sustainable as a lifestyle plan. Yeah. And then I'm like, oh, well, this is working. And then I started sharing it with people. And then, obviously I wanted to help people after that, but not until I take care of myself first. So
yeah, I'll let you in on a little secret too. Yeah, I'll let you in on a little secret too. Every single program and book that I've ever written was for myself.
Yeah, exactly, dude.
Like, I've got like 15, 17 books out right now, and every single program I ever put together was like, I want to do this program. That's why I know it's a good program. It's because if it's something I want to do, then I know it's going to be great. Because
totally. Yeah, that's great. That's cool to hear that, because I'm like, oh, am I a dick? Like, what's the?
No, man, you're completely normal.
Yeah, I think that's when you get the greatest work or the greatest art or the greatest programs, right? Is when it starts out as a problem you're trying to solve for yourself, because you're very passionate about it, obviously. Yeah. So, and then you do that, and you will share. And I've always looked at myself. I don't, I know sometimes we have to market ourselves a certain way. I don't look at myself as a guru or an expert. I look at myself as a lifelong student and athlete, and the products that I create are basically sharing the knowledge that I've learned and the principles that I've learned worked in the real world. And it's great because I get to magnify that by working with clients as well offline. And so, but yeah, I always look at myself as someone who's just sharing what has helped him. And I think that's when you get the greatest work or the greatest content.
Oh, totally. And that's actually kind of one of the questions I had for you was, how do you envision yourself? Do you feel like you're a student and a teacher, or student or a teacher, or what's kind of your passion for sharing your information like that?
Yeah, it's funny because I've been doing a lot of like exploration in that area, and I actually am uncomfortable, and it's often why I don't offer online coaching, because I don't look at myself as a coach. It's weird. There's something that gets lost in the online translation as to where when I'm working with someone offline, it almost seems like two teammates getting it after it in a gym or whatever, and you're just sharing this knowledge and you're helping each other out. I have a hard time when I'm online, like, and people see me as this guru or this expert or this coach. I'm very uncomfortable with that. So for me, I do look at it as a guy who's like, an athlete who's doing this in the real world, who just happens to be using the writing or the product medium to sort of share those lessons I've learned and those strategies. And that's also why I say, listen, I've gotten to this point because I've tested and assessed, and I've taken different parts from different training camps and nutrition camps, and I've come up, like the Bruce Lee we talked about, is absorb what's useful, reject what's useless, add what's your own, and then come up with a good starting point. that's the way I look at myself, is that I'm sharing strategies with people from which they can go out then and, maybe learn a few things, test it, apply it, see if it works, and then refine it to fit their own needs. So I have a very hard time seeing myself, and that's why I don't offer online coaching, is that I feel like my best way I can share this is through content, and then, obviously doing things like this and just sharing these stories and how I learned them and things like that. So yeah, I don't know if that answered the question, but yeah,
Totally, yeah.
I see myself as more of maybe Peyton Manning, or a leader who's playing with the people, as opposed to like some coach who's just sitting back in a chair and calling plays. You know what I mean?
Oh, absolutely, yeah. I mean, basically, to kind of sum it up, you don't see yourself as this guru who's a level above people.
Yeah,
You see
no,
yourself on the same continuum, just maybe further along the path.
sure,
And
yeah,
you're kind of sharing to help pull people along with you.
yeah, yeah,
And that's, no.
yeah, I'm happiest as a student, so I'm always reading and reading other authors. So, to me, I always see myself as learning from them. So I just don't like being projected as a guru, because I'm actually still learning along the way from all these different, experts, and, guys like you with your innovative exercises, and then, nutrition, research reviews and things like that. So I'm always learning all the time. So I'm very uncomfortable with it. But I get, like, sometimes online, something gets lost in the marketing translation too. You kind of have to project yourself as an expert because people want answers. But,
Yeah.
For me, that's always been very hard for me.
Yeah, I'm exactly in the same boat with you. I never think of myself as this guru doling out information from on high. It's like I'm just like everybody else here. I'm just, learning every opportunity I get, and
Yeah,
creating, and I want to share things with everybody to help pull them along with me. And
totally, man.
that's the fun part of it to me, is either creating or reading or coming up with stuff and sharing that with people so that they can come along with me and share the enthusiasm.
Yeah, man, we're all teammates in this thing, and I think that's when I find the most joy, is when, it's like, hey, man, here's what I've learned, and I can see where you're struggling. All right, let's go, let's get after it, let's try this, and we'll see how it works.
Especially with your dietary approach too, that's such a huge, light bulb moment for people when they say, I can eat a big meal for dinner and lose fat.
Yeah,
I can imagine when you explain that to clients in person, that look of like awe on their face has got to be just amazing.
yeah, it's great, and it's actually, it's crazy. We've become so far away from what we're naturally meant to do, that when you tell people that, it's almost like you're like a fad diet guy. They're like, oh no, that's like a total fad diet. What, you can eat a big dinner? I'm like, dude, what do you think we did for like most of our existence? Like, so it takes a little bit of like, nah, man, like, think about it logically. Get away from, diet industry stuff. Just think about it logically. And they're like, oh yeah, well, yeah, if you put it that way, well, that kind of makes sense. It's like, yeah, so it's funny. It's like, we're so far away from what we're meant to be doing that sometimes you're like, oh, you're a fad diet guy. You're telling me that I could eat a nice dinner and actually enjoy my diet? That's ridiculous. I'm like, did you just listen to what you just said?
Yeah, it should be painful and miserable the whole time. I mean,
Yeah,
what are you selling? What kind of garbage are you selling? It's like, no, that's not right. There's a lot of resistance to it. It's just crazy.
Totally.
Yeah. But yeah, for you who's watching this, don't worry about that. Try this. This is very effective stuff. Literally, I've been doing this for a couple of years now, and it's fantastic. This approach is absolutely life-altering if you've been kind of roped into the 6 small meals a day. I did that for the longest time when I first started training, and for years after that. You got to do this small meals, and then gradually, as I kind of moved through that, gradually kind of compressed into fewer and fewer meals just naturally.
Yep.
And then I got to the point where I was kind of almost doing this, and then when I saw this explanation, like you had seen there and shared, it's like, that makes sense, and now I know why it makes sense and why I was doing that and gravitating towards that. And once you kind of grasp that, it's a big light bulb moment, and that's what makes it.
One more thing, just based on what you said there, just so
absolutely.
that I know a lot of guys who are following you are probably in great shape, is that I am not one of these guys who basically says there's some people who will use bashing the bodybuilding nutrition approach as a way to sell their own program. That is not me. And if it has come off in the marketing that way, I'm sorry, because I know that it will immediately turn people off. That immediately turned me off to an alternative approach, because I've gotten great results on bodybuilding nutrition in the past, and I've gotten great results doing 6 small meals and starving at night, basically. So I know it works. And I don't want to lose credibility by saying that doesn't work, because I know plenty of people follow it that way. What I'm just saying is given the hierarchy of importance in terms of numbers and food choices being the most important, bodybuilding nutrition can work, but there are other plans that can work well, and I think that work better from a sustainability and practicality standpoint. So bodybuilding nutrition can work, and like you said, you used to do that as well and got great results as you gravitated towards this other approach, and so have I. So I don't want to scare people off from trying it by saying bodybuilding nutrition doesn't work, because I think that's what initially turned me off to it. But I'm like, no, I know bodybuilding nutrition works, but this other guy's saying, oh, well, here's the science, and maybe a different approach can work just as well, but be a lot more practical and sustainable. That's what the message I would like to get across to more advanced people is that, bodybuilding nutrition works great, but there are other approaches, alternative approaches that can work just as well. Yeah. And if you're struggling with adherence and with long-term sustainability, I say give this plan a shot. Sorry, I just get that a lot online when you start talking to someone who's more advanced and you're like, no, they're like, no, I get it, your plan works, but if you're interested in something that's more sustainable, maybe this a shot, that kind of thing.
Oh yeah, I'm glad you brought that up, because in no way are we ever saying that this doesn't work, because obviously and clearly it does.
Exactly.
For me, I found personally it's so much easier not to have to do that.
Right. And it's hard because online there's so much stuff, and there are people who are bashing bodybuilding nutritionists out intermittent fasting, and so you immediately get lumped into that group, and that's not me. I'm like, a variety of approaches can work. I just feel like this is a great one for long-term sustainability. So I just wanted to clarify that, because I get people sometimes, you're online, you get people emailing you, be like, oh, you're an idiot, bodybuilding nutrition's great. I'm like, I never said it wasn't. It's just
there's picking little things here and there.
Right. Yeah. Sure. So
no, it's like everything is a tool in the toolbox, and that's my opinion with everything with training. I mean, even like exercises that are supposedly bad, like upright rows, or for the longest time I thought you do one rep or you destroy your shoulders, but now it's like some people can do them just fine for 20 years.
Absolutely.
Why should I tell them not to do that because I read something in a book that says it impinges your shoulder? I'm like, for me, I can't do a single rep, and so I don't do them.
Right.
Do them, be my guest. It's nothing's wrong, nothing's right. It's a tool in the toolbox, and it is what it is, and that's the approach you're taking with this too.
Well, you can tell you're an athlete and you're someone who works with people in the real world, because anyone who does that knows it's all just tool and toolbox, and you use, like a carpenter, use the right tool for the right job, right?
Exactly, yeah. And you had mentioned a few of your role models and mentors in the this dietary kind of program. Could you kind of expand a little bit more on who they are and kind of what they taught you?
Yeah, absolutely. So, like I said, I picked and pulled from a variety of approaches. So with the food choice approach, the original Paleo diet guys, Lauren Condane and Rob Wolf, were very helpful. Rob's become a good friend, actually. There's a guy, Stefan Guillenet, who writes a blog now. It's called Whole Health Source, I think, Whole Health Source. So he does a lot of research on obesity and what we talked about, the non-industrialized cultural diet, which I really like that framework in terms of looking at cultures that don't have a lot of refined foods. So that runs the gamut of kind of low carb to high carb, and whether you eat coconut versus whether you eat potatoes, right? It doesn't matter. It's the food refining that is part of the problem. So that's sort of the people I follow in the kind of food choice realm. In the sports nutrition, bodybuilding nutrition, the old school guys like Chris Aceto, some sports nutrition researchers like Asker Jukendrup, just basic textbooks in sports nutrition. McCardle's a good one. I don't want to, Eric Helms, Alan Aragon's research review, and kind of, the athletic demographic sports nutrition realm. And then in terms of diet structure, the biggest one for me was Ori Hofmeckler, who originally wrote about this whole kind of, warrior diet, one main meal a day at night, intermittent fasting. He kind of, I think, started that whole craze. Martin Burkhan was a big influence in the beginning. Lean Gains, intermittent fasting. I feel like I'm on the Oscars, man. I'm going to leave someone out.
And I'd like to thank
just a ton of people. I mean, I read all the time. I'm obsessed with this stuff. So like I said, I'm more obsessive as a student than I am as a coach. So I'm reading every day about this stuff. Adelfo Saramin is a new one. He writes a blog called Subversity or something like that. So he's always posting research and stuff. Some of it's way out there, but a lot of it's good stuff. So about everything really. So yeah, I mean, those are just some. I'm sure I'm leaving some out.
Although I'm sure they'll all be personally offended and will be contacting you
Yeah, I'm
very,
sure
very
they
quickly.
give a damn what Nate Miyaki thinks for
Yeah,
sure. So,
yeah,
yeah, but I do kind of break it up into three different realms, and that's why I
yeah,
said I kind of pulled from different people in different realms. So
yeah,
the food choice sort of paleo, non-industrialized cultural diets for the food choice model, the sports nutrition, old school bodybuilding numbers for the physique and performance, and then the diet structure people more for just practicality and sustainability. So
yeah.
those are my sort of influences.
Nice. Yeah, I've heard of most of those guys. Not all of them, but most of them. So that's
Yeah. Cool.
yeah. The what would your advice be, just to kind of close things out, for what's the single most important factor for success for somebody looking to lose fat, and either with your program, with the program, whatever, just in general? What would you say the single biggest success factor is?
Yeah, I would say, and it's funny, I just got this question that I just answered in a support thing, but for me, I've been leaning more towards lately is think about sustainability right from the beginning. And I think that will save you a lot of time. And even if it takes a little bit more time and patience to get the results you're looking for, I think it will lead to a much bigger long-term lifestyle approach. So there's a lot of things that work. Yes, you can cut carbs to zero and be miserable, but are you going to stick to that the rest of your life as a lifestyle plan? Because I've been telling people that the plan you use to either lose fat or build muscle, whatever, is most likely the plan that's going to have to it's going to have to look very similar to maintain those results. So you want to think about sustainability right from the beginning. There's a lot of approaches that can work as a quick fix, but what I think is the key to long-term success, and that's why diet success rates suck, is that the statistics, they don't count them unless you can lose the weight and maintain it for a year. So I'm like, oh, that's why they're 2 to 20%, right? I
Yeah.
want people to think about sustainability right from the beginning, and I think that's why we focus on the half-day diet structure and real foods and the right diet numbers, because I don't think extreme diet plans and work for the long term. So
Yeah.
if I could give people that one piece of advice, think about sustainability right from the beginning.
Yeah, no, that's fantastic advice, and I totally agree with you on that. And especially with the crash diets and stuff, it's
Yep.
obviously yo-yo the whole deal.
Right.
So we want to avoid that and keep it on a sustainable path. So,
Yep.
Nate, I want to thank you so much for your time here. This has been a lot of fun talking to you. Had a blast going through all this nutritional stuff. This is I can tell you share the passion for this just like me, and it's
Oh
awesome.
yeah, I love it, man. I hope your audience pulls something useful from my ramblings, and I hope it helps. And I appreciate the opportunity for sure.
Absolutely. And for you watching this, link down below here. Check out Nate's half-day diet program. This is fantastic stuff. As I said, this is literally how I eat myself. I might change things up here and there if I've got specific goals, but in terms of long term, this is how I eat. And I think this is a fantastic concept, and I think you're going to love it. So definitely click on that link right now and go grab a copy of it. This is fantastic stuff.